Welcome to Ground Up Growth, where we share entrepreneurial insights, business strategies, and personal growth lessons to help listeners build success from the ground up.
Welcome back to Ground Up Growth. Today we're on episode 11 and we have Miss Leisha Pickering here. Leisha owns and founded Musee Bath and located here in your headquarters.
It's in Canton. Mm-hmm.
Leisha, thank you so much for coming on. I'm super fired up to hear your story and just walk through it with you and see what I can learn and what you can teach me today. So,
well, I'm not sure if I'm going to teach you anything, but I'm just thank you for inviting me. And it's really just a pleasure to be here with you. We've never met in person, but I have seen your picture on billboards. So it's really fun to meet you.
People say, they say, I see your signs everywhere. And I'm like, that means it hadn't sold yet. So.
Well, it's really fun to meet you in real life. So thank you. I'm happy to be here this morning.
Well, kick us off. Tell us a little bit about how you got into Musee Bath.
Okay. All right. Well, I'd love to tell you a little bit of my background. I spent most of my adult life, I didn't grow up in Mississippi. I grew up in Memphis, but I did go to Ole Miss. But most of my adult life was spent in Washington, D.C. I was living in right on Capitol Hill. I was married to a U.S. congressman who represented the 3rd District of Mississippi here. So we had deep ties to Mississippi, and I've loved this state a really long time. But I lived right on Capitol Hill, just about 2 blocks from the Capitol, and I was raising 5 little boys there in a old, beautiful townhouse, and spent a lot of days just strolling up and down Pennsylvania Avenue and playing on the grounds of the Capitol. And then I worked as a pastry chef there. And so I really loved that. And I grew my pastry business. And then I began to move more into like event planning. And in Washington, which is a city that's very event driven, it was a lot of fun. One of the things I was able to do is one of probably my most special moments is we were there when 9/11 happened. Wow. And that was a really frightening time for our country, but also if you were in such close proximity there. And we lived, several miles from the Pentagon when the plane hit it. And, it was just a really difficult period for our whole country to recover, but particularly those that were really impacted. And one of the things that I look back and think was one of my most special moments up there is I got to plan a big baby shower for all the women that were pregnant during 9/11 who lost their husbands. And there was 108 of them who, when they had their babies, they had lost their husbands in 9/11. Wow. So I went to New York and we did a beautiful baby shower up there. We had gifts for all the women. We celebrated them. It was just really fun. But I look back on that as really something that was really significant and impactful to my own life.
So when you did the wedding event, was that something you started or did you work? The event planning. I started the event planning company, and Leisha Pickering Creative, which isn't terribly creative. But most of my gifts are I'm kind of artistic. My gifts are in creativity. I really didn't have a business background. One thing in Washington, though, it is very as I mentioned, it's a very event-driven city, and I had small children, and I think as a mom and for many women here, even in our state, they're looking for a way to have an extra income while still being present for their families. Right. And they're really looking for ways to support their husband. And that's what I was, doing. Right. And
So what'd you graduate in at Ole Miss?
I was, my background was in communicative disorders, which is like speech therapy and all, which really, I grew up in Memphis, as I mentioned. My mom was a nurse and my daddy was a thoracic surgeon. So I had always kind of been surrounded by the sciences, I guess. And I guess there was a part of me that thought I would go, entertain the thought of going into one of those fields. And then when I got to college, I really, like a lot of people, I really didn't know what I would do. And so I kind of studied biology and then moved into a speech therapy, but that wasn't really that really wasn't the path.
Passion,
That's not necessarily where my passion was, but it also wasn't where my skill set was. I think that we're all given like gifts, and you need to know what your giftedness is. And I've always been highly creative, and I receive a lot of joy when I create. I always kind of think about when I'm creating and working with my hands is when I feel most alive. And it's also where I feel the nearness of God in my life. And so I think that we're all created to have meaning also. And I think when we can find a work that we're passionate about and be using our natural giftedness, that's often where we find it. So like with doing pastries, it allowed me the work of my hand. But one of the things with creative people, they tend to get bored kind of easily. So it was a lot of repetition, which I really don't. I love creative challenges. So event planning kind of leaned into that.
Always something new.
It's always something new. Like I mentioned the luncheon in New York, I just had it opened my imagination of how can we make these women feel loved and special.
That's a very unique challenge.
Yeah.
And to embrace that and lean in. I think that's so big how, and we've talked about this on several podcasts, and myself included. I went to Mississippi State and went into mechanical engineering, and my skill set was not there. To your point, and but I ended up leaning into my passion, which ended up being land and real estate, and so that's really encouraging to hear.
And it just takes some figuring out. I think a lot of people land in college because that's where they think they're supposed to be, and but they're not even. I think when you're that age, a lot of times I think it's almost unusual to know necessarily. What your passion is, or what or maybe just what your giftedness is. And sometimes it just takes growing into that a little bit. I know for me, I don't even know that I saw myself as a highly creative person at that age, but that's really, I'm
right.
I recognize
you're still maturing
that
at that age, and still, I agree with that 100%. The odds of you knowing what the roadmap is really going to look like, but being open to that roadmap moving is so big. I think just open to change, open to wherever your passion leads you and skill set. So,
and I think that's true even in life, that we come to these times in our life and maybe our passion shifts a little bit, or the road takes a curve, and we have to be willing to shift with it or pivot.
That's really good.
So that's also for me, my whole journey. And I think as we talk more, it has been learning just to figure it out and to be able to take a risk. One thing about me I have learned is, if you knew me well, I'm sometimes a little naive, but I am a risk taker. And so sometimes I don't know what I don't know, but I'll just risk it, and I think that maybe that's been good for me, because I'll figure it out. And I always say that's one of the things I always say, we'll just figure it out. And sometimes life is that. It's not so clear. And I think actually it's more that way, that you think you might know, but then you come to a point you got to figure it out. And most of my life and most of my adult life has been trying to figure it out. So
that's a really good outlook for sure. All right, so you did the event planning, and then what was the move from there? So,
Well, I was working in DC. We had these 5 boys. I was really loved living up there, though.
I was going to ask you what
I
your
loved
take
it.
on
I mean,
DC
people
was.
always talk about Washington. It's like
Because
this
you told me
big
when we talked a little bit
evil.
earlier, you lived in Florida, so like that's
totally different
different
places. You know, I loved DC. We had a great community of around, and I know like politics and all. It gets such a and understandably is, you know, sometimes a negative. It has such a negative image, but what you got to realize, and at least when I was there, and right now things there are very contentious, and but when I was there, it just seemed like, you know, it was a lot of families that I loved people on both sides, and I knew their families and their children's, and it fostered a great community for me. And I felt rich in friendship there. Wow. And then we had a church I loved, and that provided another community. And then my children also went to a school called Rivendell, which is, the name comes from the Lord of the Rings. It was really a school that was really amazing and very nurturing. And so that provided a community. So I loved my time up there. Another thing about Washington is it's a beautiful city, and it provides, you know, I would spend, you know, it's particularly when my children were young, I would put them in strollers or strap them on my back and go to the museums, or, you know, go to the galleries, and there's always something going on. And I kind of thrive I like really culturally diverse places anyway. I think that fosters creativity. I think it fostered my worldview also. So it was really a wonderful period of my life, and some of the sweetest memories I have. And so I love that. But as my boys were getting older, we just needed, Washington is also an expensive place to live.
I can imagine.
And I will add this, though, as much of the world is becoming, you know, but Washington is a very expensive city to live in. But also we had 5 boys, and we just needed more space. And we were limited on what those options were up there. And so we started thinking about moving back home and just the community that could be provided here also. So we made the decision, and it was a big decision and a big jump, as you said. Right. I mean, Washington, D.C. is very different than Florida, Mississippi. And so, we bought a home just actually where we're sitting doing this podcast, probably half a mile away. And we bought a farm with some land and packed up and moved here. So we, for the next 18 years, I lived in Florida, Mississippi. And and equally very different, but very rich, and offered a lot of things that we had not been provided in D.C. So. Right.
Yes, for sure. Especially 5 boys, I would think.
Yeah. Well, we just kept
some
saying
life lessons that a farm can teach you that DC probably can't.
Yes. We really actually thought, like, you know, my boys are outdoor boys, and even though all my children were born in DC, but we always had this close tie to Mississippi, and we spent our summers here. So my boys felt like they were Mississippians anyway. So they were quite excited to move here, and I really felt like if we could have some land and kind of be out, and they loved to hunt, they loved to fish, and I just thought that would keep them out of trouble. But, you know, I wasn't. Boys can get into trouble when they want to get into trouble, but it was just a really, so it was a different, but not necessarily. I mean, it was just different, you know? But for me, I think it was probably a bigger adjustment than my children, because I had been in a big city, a big vibrant city. And then, you know, Florida, Mississippi's much quieter and,
much quieter.
And
different type of noise pollution. In Florida,
and That's true. Some pollution there, but it was different. And but also for me as an adult, it was leaving my communities of friendship and having to really start all over again.
That's always a challenge.
Abraham Lincoln, though, said, I think it was Abraham Lincoln, I read this quote and I thought it was a good one. He said, if you have to find, and you can't quote this because I'm not sure it's Abraham Lincoln now that I'm saying it, but he said, if you have to move 5 miles to find happiness, you'll never be happy. And I think that's true. Like wherever you are, and wherever you put yourself, there is happiness is within us and contentment's within us, and you can root yourself wherever you are, and you can be impactful wherever you are. And though it was a change, it was just a change. And and I just had
figure it out.
Yeah, I just had to figure it out. But we loved it. And
so you moved to Florida. Did you continue doing event planning?
I did for a time. A lot of event planning is like a lot of it was just imagining what the event would look like. One of the things I love to do is just I say it's kind of like a tapestry to put an event together. So it's like putting different elements of the event together. So I could do that from here. A lot of it I could plan on my computer. And then when I usually would take several large events a year, so I could do that and be present for my children. But then usually I would fly and be present at the event too. And and I did that for a while, but then, but then I had a kind of a life-changing moment, which, I will share. But one thing I've learned in life, and, I'm a book reader. I love books. And one of the things usually in a good book is that in a good story, there's going to be some sort of conflict. And a lot of times it's how the character responds to that conflict that makes the beauty of the story. And I think that's true in life. There's kind of a lot of times a plot twist that we don't see.
Right.
And so what that was for me is that my husband, who I had moved here with and had built this farm and home and family with, wanted a divorce. And I was really blindsided by that. And what really was very unprepared for that and devastated. But you have to learn to respond to the conflict in your life. And so, but I found myself in a situation where I'm out here on a farm where I'm alone with a lot of responsibility and 5 boys. And so how do you, I'll just be really honest, like I didn't know if I had a hope or a future because so much, and I think for many women, a lot of your identity is being a wife and pouring into your family. And it just wasn't my image of what my life would be. It wasn't the story that I would have written.
Right.
But a lot of times we create these stories of how our lives are supposed to look, and the reality is much different.
Not that way.
And so then we have to figure out how do you pivot. And that just because that's what's before us, it doesn't mean you can't have a beautiful story and a beautiful life. And I know that in your listening audience, there are people that perhaps have gone through something similar. They've maybe gone through a divorce, which is extremely painful. But if they haven't gone through a divorce, perhaps I know that everybody's gone through some sort of loss. Because loss is and pain, none of us are immune from that in life. And it can be the loss of your childhood that you grieve, or the loss of a spouse that you loved, or it could be the loss of a child, or your health. And it's just the story wasn't what you thought it was going to be. And you have to figure out, how am I going to get back up and how am I going to move forward? And that's what I had to do.
So what year was that?
It was about 2009, I think.
Okay.
So I had lived here maybe about 5 years at that point.
So that's definitely a large curveball. Mm-hmm. And so I'm interested, how did you find hope through that? How did you pivot? And
well, I think one of the things when you go through something really painful, a lot of times you're just trying to survive. And that was where I was, and you just kind of feel numb. You're just trying to make it through the next day. Mm-hmm. But I had these 5 little boys. They needed to see me get back up, and I didn't have a choice, Right. I needed to they needed me to, you kind of just want to stay in bed and pull the pillow over your head.
That'd be the easy route. You're right.
Mm-hmm. But I needed to get up and fix breakfast. I didn't have that choice. And so I just kept moving forward. It's interesting. Just I kind of learned a little lesson just recently. In October, I went to Spain, and there is a walk. It's called the Camino de Santiago. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. But it's a 500-mile walk. It's a pilgrimage, and it's been going on since like the 1600s, I think, or the 1700s. It's called the Walk of St. James, and when James was evangelizing that part of the world, he was martyred. He ended up being martyred, and the story is that his body was taken to Santiago, where I think he was martyred and buried. And so for hundreds of years now, people from all over the world come and they walk this pilgrimage. If you walk it, you're called a pilgrim. And there's different paths. You can come down from Spain, you can come up from Portugal, but I had always wanted to do it. A lot of people do it for all different reasons. Some people do it for a spiritual journey. Mm-hmm. Some people do it for like healing. Some people just do it for the adventure of wanting to walk. Okay. And so, but I had wanted to do it. And so I had a friend, and we had decided we were going to do it together. And then months before we were going to go, she was diagnosed with breast cancer, which was again like a pivot in her story, like a plot twist. She hadn't seen that coming. And so throughout the summer before we were supposed to go, she had radiation, and I was concerned that it would just be too much for her to do. And I just kept saying, we can postpone this. And she said, no, I really need to do this. But we decided instead of trying to walk the 500 miles, we would do the last 100. And it was important to me to do at least 100 miles because you have to walk a certain amount. I wanted to get the certificate. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why that was like important to me, but they give a certificate at the end of your journey that says that you walked the Santiago, and you have to walk at least 100 miles. So as we're walking, we fly over. We did the walk from Portugal. And so as we're walking, there were things that were really unexpected along our way. In fact, one of the things was that a hurricane came in, and which is really symbolic to me of the storms in your life. And we had not anticipated that. So much of the walk that we did, and so we were going to walk 100 miles in 7 days, which I had not done anything. I had not physically done that before. Yeah. But we ended up part of our time was in torrential rains, and so we're walking, and a lot of times the path was so flooded that we would have to walk several miles out of our way just to get to where we were supposed to be, and there were just it was really a challenge. And I can remember and then some days were just so sweltering hot, and I can remember just walking, and I would look ahead of me, and I would just see a huge climb, a giant hill, and I'd be so tired. And we had maybe at that point already walked 15 miles with a backpack on, and I'm like, there's no way. There is no way I'm going to be able to go up that hill. And one of the things I started doing was not looking so far ahead of me, but just looking a few feet ahead of me and just take the next step. And as I walked the journey, I just kept saying, just take the next step. Just take the next step. But then I'd find myself on top of the hill.
And when we entered into the city of Santiago, and there's people from all over the world, it's very celebratory, pilgrims from all over, and you go in to see this beautiful church of St. James. As we traveled through that, I wanted to go and get my certificate because we had done the 100 miles.
Right, 100 plus because you went around.
Because we had gone around. And so they give you this little passport, and so as you're journeying, you go, there's different little stops along the way where you get stamps. And so that's how they tell how far you've walked. And so, you hold on to that little passport, and, every little town has different stamps and all. But I'll never forget, I walk in to the woman who gives the certificates, and she opens up my passport, and she's just like checking off my little stops along the way. And she looked up at me and she says, "Congratulations, you've walked to Santiago. You walked to Santiago." And I started crying. It was so unexpected. My tears just started streaming down my face. I looked at her. I go, "Thank you. Thank you so much." And I didn't even know why I was crying. And I think as I thought of it and I walked out and found my friend, I'm still crying. I couldn't believe I had done it because it was so much more challenging. But I think more than that, I was crying because here I am in life. I've gone through some really challenging things, and I don't think I thought I could get through them. Mm-hmm. But it was just taking the next step.
Right.
So to answer your question, how did I get through? It was just taking the next step. The future seemed so large, and I didn't know how that I was going to get there.
Right.
So I just focused on what the next day held for me, and getting up.
Make breakfast.
Loving and caring for my children.
Little victories.
And figuring it out. And so that's kind of what these last years have been. And I haven't always known what was ahead, but there's always a way to figure it out. And there's always hope. And if we can hold on to that, and we can just take the next step and not try to look, because the thing is, the hill can look really steep and insurmountable.
Right.
But if we just take the next step, somehow we'll find ourselves at the top of the hill.
I think that's really, really good insight, and that's very inspiring. And I think, I'm sure you probably, now and moving forward, as you run into, because you run a very successful business, and I want to hear more about that. But as you run into roadblocks and other curveballs through life, I would imagine it would be so easy for you to turn around and think back to that walk and draw from that well and be like, little steps. If I did that, I can do this, and just use that as leverage to slingshot you past the next hurdle or challenge.
And I actually do that every day. And I'll just share a really personal thing. Yesterday, I had a lab that I loved, and I have had him for 7.5 years. And, we love labs here in Mississippi.
Right.
And, but we had gotten him about 7.5 years ago. He was my son's dog. And, when he was about 6 months old, we noticed that his stomach was kind of bloated, so we took him to the vet. Well, my son had bought him to be a hunting dog and to be trained with the hopes that he'd be this great hunting dog. And but after taking him to be examined, we found he had a congenital heart defect, and he had a valve disorder, and they told us that it was incurable, it was hereditary, and that he would only have a few weeks to live. And so my son was devastated, brought him home, and we decided if he was going to only had a few weeks to live, we were going to make it a good few weeks. But I must just say, he just kept living, and we kept loving him, and he kept living. And so he kind of defied everybody for the last 7.5 years, and he has been I felt like I've been his little personal nurse and caretaker, but just really, we loved him so much and cared for him and tried to provide this great life. But every time he'd go to the vet, they'd say, he's a miracle. We don't even know how he's living. His heart's 3 sizes
larger than it's supposed to be. And we're like, heck yeah, it is. Like, that's why he loves so
Right.
well. He's so loving. But yesterday, as I was preparing to come to see you today, I was sitting at a table in my breakfast room, and my dog had been outside, and he walked in, and he just collapsed on the floor. And I got up. I said, Lou, he was named after the big black Luchacetta. And Lou, and I scooped down, like, what's wrong? Because he had just fallen on the floor, and he died in my arms.
Oh, wow.
And I, it's devastating because it was unexpected. And then you're thinking, how do I, it was a great loss. We loved him. And this was yesterday. And, but you just get up. And so today's a new day, and I'm here with you. But, you have all these things like, how do I move forward? Like, this is devastating. I can tell you that I would, yesterday was tears, but today's a new day. And so, and you learn, you just learn, and you just figure it out, and you move forward. But we're always going to have some sort of loss. Because life, I think we have an image that life isn't going to be hard.
Right.
I know I had that. I'm a really idealistic person. And I had this image that life is going to be easy. But I think that a lot of life has loss, and we learn how to find the beauty in that. And that's the richness of life, is finding that beauty. And in our pain, life isn't all pain. It's mixed. And so it's savoring the beauty and walking through the pain. And so
I really appreciate you sharing, being vulnerable and sharing that. And I'm very sorry for your loss with Lou. And, but that, to your point, is a perfect example. You could have texted me or called me and said, Paul, tomorrow's not going to work.
And I thought about it. And then I said, tomorrow's a new day.
That's
and
so
it's not going to
inspiring.
change what happened today.
Right.
But you just get up and you move
appreciate
forward.
that so much, that you leaned into another curveball, and just because, we've had a lot. This is only episode 11, but we've had a lot of positive feedback that, this is what this podcast was built for and what it's about. And I can promise you, our listeners are retrieving some very good information and very good, because people are going through, like I said, everybody says, like on social media, everybody posts pictures of everybody grinning, but no, there are valleys, and people are going through stuff. We're all going through stuff.
Look beautiful,
and to open up and be vulnerable it takes a lot of courage to do that, and to just put it out there that life is not just rose-colored glasses. I think that's how the personal growth side of things is. That's the only way to grow, is to lean into the vulnerability side of things and just the challenges. And I think you're leading by example in a great way.
Thank you. I think if ever I could, I think a lot of people, and you mentioned social media, we look at that and it all seems beautiful, doesn't it? And that somebody has more than we, or has a happier life than we do. And I've really tried to limit my time on social media, because I could felt really vulnerable to feeling discontent. I could look at these intact families and felt my family's broken, and I think one of the being discontent leads only to like unhappiness, and it steals our joy.
It is,
and so, but I really believe that we're here to be vulnerable and to walk through life together. And if we can do that, and we can
let our guard down.
Yeah, and let our pain be there, to weep with people and to celebrate joy with people, celebrate their great victories, and then but also to be there in their pain and suffering. That's who I want to be. There's a beautiful word. I think it's from India. I think it's a Hindu word, and we don't even have a word like it in the United States, in our language. And it's mudita. And the word mudita means vicarious joy. And what it kind of means, I think, is that that we when someone has some great successes, that we can have joy for their successes. I think that sometimes we're wired, we see what other people have, and we are like going, man, I wish that had happened to me. Like so-and-so got a raise, or so-and-so got a promotion, or so-and-so got this beautiful house, and we can't be happy for somebody else's joy and success. And it just breeds discontentment. And so if we can learn to have mudita for people, like celebrate with them in their in their joy, and then be there for them in their suffering, that's just a more contented life,
right,
and a more beautiful life.
And I agree with that 100%. And it's joy is what a lot of people, I mean, the word joy is just, to truly experience joy, you've got to put yourself in the position to get there. Like it's true joy is different from just social media happy.
Yeah. And happiness,
I think you framed it up very well.
Happiness is kind of a fleeting thing. Joy is something that's deep, that lives deep in our soul. And I want to choose joy in my life. I want to be about things that create that within me, and are surrounded by people that foster that in me too. So,
that's awesome.
So yeah.
All right. So transition from, so you did some event planning when y'all moved back to Flora.
I did.
Went through the divorce.
Trying to figure out a path forward. And as I mentioned, one of the things that I think that as I said, like you kind of feel numb and you're just trying to survive. And I think that I began to realize, like, I'm happy. And I mentioned this earlier, like I feel joy when I create. And I have this like yearning. I had this deep yearning to just start creating again. And, you know, another thing about surviving is you're tired. It sucks your life and your energy. But for me, using my giftedness in creating was life-giving to me, and it gave me energy. And so what I wanted to do is just to start creating again. And I said that I think that's my natural giftedness, but I also feel the nearness of God, as I mentioned, when we're doing what we're naturally born to do. And so, but another thing is I was living out here on a farm, and the interesting thing about Mississippi is, we and you know this, we're the poorest state in the country. We have the most generous people, but we're a very poor state. And I moved here to Madison County. Madison County is actually, I believe, the wealthiest county in our state. So you have people here that have great wealth and great opportunity. But we also have people in Madison County that have very little wealth, very little resources, and very little opportunity. And we all kind of coexist together. And interestingly enough, too, we bump up to the Delta. And the Delta is the poorest region in our entire country. So I was living on this beautiful farm surrounded, I say farm, I was raising boys and I had some horses. But I had people coming by, and they were in need of work and just looking for a way to make have a wage. And so I started, and I would have things I could offer to them. I could maybe cut my field, like bush hog, or fix some fences, but I didn't have anything really sustainable.
Right.
And I just started thinking, and really focusing on, surely I'm a creative person. Maybe I can come up with an idea of something that's handmade that I could teach someone to make, and we could sell it. It would provide a little income, just a little resources. I mean, I wasn't thinking I want to create a company at all. I'm thinking, what is something I can do that would maybe impact this person and provide and care for my community in a way. And so I'm a bath taker. And I love baths. I think a lot of times we create around the things we know and love.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But since I was a little girl, if I was ever upset over anything, and if women are listening to this, you might identify, but my mother, if I ever got upset, she would say, you either need a nap or a bath. And that is something even is true in my life today. When I feel myself upset, I either go take a nap or I get in a warm bathtub, and it's like a warm cocoon of water that wraps around you. That's very healing. It's a very therapeutic. So, as I mentioned, I had been a pastry chef in Washington. I had a bunch of KitchenAids, and I just pulled my KitchenAids out in my kitchen, and I started reading a lot about essential oils and natural oils. And if I created something, I wanted to do something that would be healing. I wanted it to be soothing for your skin. I wanted to create aromatherapy. I wanted it to be something that would be relaxing. And I was really thinking of something that for women like my age, because I had known the stresses and something, and I know how hard it is also to be a mom and just the daily demands and almost feeling like you never get a break, and that you might have that little bit of time where you can slip into the bath by yourself if you're lucky without children climbing in, and just be alone, and that would be something that would add to that experience. And so I had started, as I mentioned, researching about different properties and ingredients that could provide that. And I had been in England about 5 years earlier, and there was a company that were making what they called bath bombs. Mm-hmm. I had never seen them before. And I thought, those are cool. And I can remember even at that time, which would have been 5 years earlier, thinking, I bet I could figure out how they make these. Mm-hmm. And we could make them in Mississippi. But at that, really not ever thinking I would do that. I just stored it away in one of those little rooms. And you have those little rooms in your brain that you tuck things away.
Right. I've got like several business ideas sitting in there right now, just being stagnant.
So you understand. So I just tucked it away, but never really feeling like I was going to take it out. But I was standing in my kitchen, and I thought back on those bath bombs that I had seen. And I thought, using my skills as a pastry chef, I thought, I can figure that out. That's just mixing ingredients together. Mm-hmm. And just like in pastries, the finer your ingredients, the better the outcome, the finer the flour, the content of the butter or the chocolate, it makes a difference in the end result. I wanted to use the finest ingredients that I could find. And so I started just mixing and experimenting, and I kind of laughed because bath bombs typically are round, but I didn't have any kind of a mold. So I had these these little molds that I used for chocolates that were in the shapes of rabbits, where they were like little French chocolate rabbits, that I used to make. Well, I started pressing bath bombs. So all the first bath bombs were they're little rabbits lined up on my counter, because it was just the only mold I had. And I started, one of the things, I had a little book, a little, spiral folder, and I was listening to music, and I'm going to probably date myself, but I started naming them after songs, and I'd date, this one's yellow, and it has a lot of sugars in it. We'll call it Here Comes the Sun. Now I'm post Beatles, but I named one. It was pink, purple, and sparkly. I named it Purple Rain, and I just started naming them after songs. And so, had all these lined up on my counter. And
what year was this?
This was in about 2011.
Okay.
And so, and I was just kind of getting back up on my feet, kind of. Right. And but it was about 2011. I had also helped start the Livingston Farmers Market, which I'm not sure if it's continuing today, but at that time it was very vibrant. We were starting this farmers market, and we just needed vendors. So I thought, well, we'll just take these out here. Again, it was just a small idea. It wasn't like I'm creating a company. It's just a small idea.
And this was just you at this time?
I had hired a couple of people.
The people that were coming around. And
truthfully, I had started it as a way to just provide some work. So I got a couple people and that we're going to do this together. And we are, but with not the intention that it would go farther than that it would provide wages. Now, I want to make a point here and say one thing. As I began to focus less on my own pain and focus on the needs and pain of others, I realized like this beautiful miracle happened. Because as I began not to be so focused on my heartache, and I began to, I felt so vulnerable, but I realized there are many people that feel vulnerable every day. And as I began to focus on their vulnerability, their pain, their needs, this beautiful thing occurred in my own life, and it began to provide healing for me.
Wow.
And it was like a little miracle. I think that's true in life. I think when we go through losses, we're so focused on our pain. And if we can begin shifting that and say, how do I take this pain and use it and to love and care and serve other people, that's where the healing begins.
That's really good. I like
the
that.
Sweetness.
Yeah.
And so,
as opposed to being self-centered, which is natural to be self-centered.
Yeah, and just stuck. Like more than anything, when we go through something difficult,
we want to sit.
We just want to sit in it, and that's okay. It's okay to sit in it for a while. And healing takes a long time. I'm still healing, and I want to add this: I will feel sad about that for always.
Right.
I will always feel sad about that. But it doesn't mean I can't have a beautiful and joyful life.
Correct.
And so you figure out how to get back up. And so part of Musee was the getting back up. And so we just went out there and we tried to create something beautiful that people would love, and started telling them about them. And nobody knew what they were. Now, people mostly now know what bath bombs are, but we were kind of like, people didn't have any idea what they were, because we were kind of like now they're in the market a lot, and you see them. But at that point, people would ask us, like, do you eat it?
This?
Like, are they soap? And we would really literally have to explain how you use them. And, though my idea of doing bath bombs wasn't original, I feel like when you do something, and I'm not sure if any ideas are completely original, but when as I mentioned, I had been in a shop in England and had seen these. But I think what you do is you try to do it, improve on it, and you make it better. And you don't just copy something, you make it better. And you make your version of what you imagine it to be. Right. And so that's what we did. I wanted it to be better ingredients. I wanted it to be a little oversized. And like one of the things we did is they were called bath bomb. Well, I don't like the word bomb. A bomb is destructive. We don't have to look far in our world to see what's happening in our world today, to see the destruction of the word bomb, of a bomb.
Right.
Bombs destroy. So when I decided that we were going to call ours balms, BALM. It's just a little change, but a balm, it heals you, it soothes you, it's life-giving. A balm is life-giving. And that's what our bath bombs, I wanted them to do for women or whoever used them. I wanted it to be something that was life-giving, that if you feel anxiety, that it would help minimize that it would make your skin feel wonderful. It would, that's
such a small change, but a big change.
It's a small change, but yeah, a big change. And it's funny because people all the time on our Instagram, they'll say, do y'all not know that the real word is balm? Like we don't know that.
Right, like
it's
we don't
balm,
know.
The B-O-M-B.
Thanks for letting us know that.
Yeah. So, but like everything we do is very intentional, as that was.
So where did the name Musee come from?
Well, Musee, it's kind of a funny little thing because people ask that. Now, when you create a brand, I didn't really have a name, but like if I was going to do something, I wanted it to be branded. And so we had this intention to go out and just sell them at the farmer's market. But I wanted it to have, a brand and maybe a little logo, and I just want it to be well done. And so the word Musee, the root of it is muse. And when I was growing up, I would always use the word Musee, taking it from the word muse, like just my little change on it, Musee, for the things that bring you joy, the things you love in life, the things that touch your sweet spot. Like I'm looking out at your land here, and I bet you have beautiful sunsets. A sunset could be a Musee, like something that takes your breath away, something that where you just go, oh, it touches that deep spot in your heart. And it can be, I always, when I lived out in Florida, when it would rain, there would be those little green frogs. You probably get them too. And they were just vibrant green. And they had little suction cup feet. And they're tiny. But I would look at them on my back windows and they took my breath away.
Right.
For me, those were like muses, the things that you delight in, the things that bring joy to you, the things that let you know that there's a creator, because it's so much beauty in it. And so that was just my little made up word.
Right.
Well, when my last son was born, I would always say, you're my little Musee. Like, you're the thing that delights me. You're the thing that brings me joy. And I would started calling him that, and other people would call him that. And until he was like 3 or 4, and he didn't want that nickname anymore. He was like, I'm Harper. Right. I'm not Musee. I don't want to be Musee. And so fast forward, I have created these bath bombs. I'm wanting to go out to the farmer's market, but I'm having trouble finding a name for the company. And one of the reasons is, and when you create a brand, I believe this, when you have a brand name, it should be something meaningful to you, or at least for me, this is what I want. I want it to be meaningful. And but I also want it to make sense. So that if you're ever sitting on a podcast and someone asks you, like you're asking me, where did you get the name? It makes sense.
Right.
It's not something that's just pulled
We didn't do it on a name generator.
Yeah, like it's something that means something. And so anyway, I was sitting with Harper. He was about 13 then, and I had created these bath bombs, and they had to do with water, something that you use for your bath, but I had named them after songs. And I was having trouble marrying the two ideas together. Like it has to do, it's something that is for your bath. It has to do with, but I named them after songs. Where does that meet? Where's the meeting in the middle that makes sense on it? And I was having really a trouble, and I'm usually like a little wordsmith. I can come up with words easily. Yeah, but I couldn't come up with a word. So I'm talking to Harper, and I say, hey, I need you to help me think of a name for this bath bomb company. And he said, why don't you name it after me, Mom? And what he meant was Harper Pickering Bath Bomb Company. That's what he was meaning. But I kind of looked at him, and I hadn't said it in years, but my term of endearment for him had been Musee. And I kind of jokingly said, you mean Musee? And he laughed and like, Mom, like, don't start it.
Yeah, here we go again.
Yeah. And he said, but as he walked off, I started thinking, Musee. Musee's a word that's meaningful to me. It's the things that are it's a term of endearment, things that bring you joy, things that you love, so it meant something. But I was still having trouble marrying the idea that I had named all these bath bombs after these songs. Where does that, how does it make sense? So I went in and I began to read about muses. As I said, the root of Musee is muse. Well, muses were water maidens. They lived in the water.
Oh, wow.
And they spent their life singing songs and quoting lyrics.
Ooh.
So it brought it all together.
Wow.
So we've been Musee ever since. So that's where the name
came from. Well, I would say that aligns perfectly with your passion, your vision.
So and it's kind of funny because people will call us or we'll meet people and they'll always say, hello, have I reached Musee? And
I'm sure. I'm sure you get.
Musee it's the French word for museum. And it sounds very fancy, but we're not that fancy. And, we're from Mississippi and we'll have to say, no, we're Musee.
And you're like, well, it depends on how many are you ordering.
We can be Musee, but we're really just Musee.
We can be Musee today.
So, but that's the, where we got the name. But just to move a little forward, we were at this farmer's market. We got we got a following, and we would have to explain to people. I mean, I had a little pitch. Oh, these are bath bombs. They're made out of essential oils and natural oils. We pair them with sugar, sea salt, herbs, honey, milk bath. I'd tell them the whole spiel. You'd put them in a warm tub of water. They dissolve, and I can tell you the whole thing because I said it so many times. They'll color the water, but they won't stain your tub or your skin, and everything washes down the drain. And one thing we did is we put little surprises on the inside, and the thought was that they wouldn't be for focused like on children, that we are putting these little like treasures. I called them treasures inside, but it'd be a little something at the end of your bath that would make you feel loved. So like we had one called Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, and it had a little diamond in it. Or Here Comes the Sun might have a little sunshine. But it would be like at the end of the bath, if the water's draining, you would see this and you would say, wow, this is for me. And it would just make you feel loved.
That's very thoughtful.
So, the farmer's market, it's seasonal and it ended. And so I'd hired at this point a couple people. They still needed work. So I think you just start thinking.
Figure it out.
Yeah, you just figure it out. So I started, and as I mentioned, I'm kind of naive, but I'm a risk taker. And I had heard the international gift market in Atlanta, something I had never been to, had no idea what it actually was. But I said, why don't we just go there? And so I applied to go to the gift market in Atlanta. Now, the gift market is like 3 huge city blocks, and it's thousands of vendors from all over the world. And they're selling everything. Many of them have beautiful booths, very established brands. But we just went and set up a little booth.
And is that where like retailers are coming by?
Yeah, retailers from all over the world also come to buy for their stores. And so they're buying wholesale to then go back to their store and be able to sell at retail.
So you got your sales pitch down.
I got my little sales pitch at the farmer's market down.
Got your warm tub of water.
Yeah, and I just started telling people, we set up this very simple booth. People again would come up. We had no competition. Nobody else was doing what we were doing. And we just started telling people why we were doing what. We just started telling people like the story. And I can remember this lady, I was telling her all about it. And she stopped me and she goes, like, you are so passionate about these bath bombs. And I stopped and I go, well, I'm really passionate about our product. I think we make a really good product. But, I'm really even more passionate about the hands that made the product. Would you like to hear that story? And I started telling why we're doing what we're doing. And the reason we are doing it is to care for our community, and that there's many people that need help. And there's many people needing hope, and that we have the opportunity to love and care for people in our community. And in doing that, we can impact the world. And so that's still today the heart of Musee. And we're right here in Madison County, and we're trying to serve the vulnerable here. And so what we've really done all these years later is to look at some of the vulnerable in our state. And one of those population is women coming out of prison. And, people don't just end up in prison. It's not usually just one choice, but it's a series of choices. But most of the women that we work with have had come out of prison with felony convictions. There's been a lot of abuse in their lives. There's been a lot of brokenness in their lives too. And if you're wanting to rewrite your story, you have to have somebody that sees the beauty in you. And they don't measure you by your past, but they see the possibilities and the potential and the beauty in your life. And what we partnered with the nonprofit called Crossroads. Crossroads is led by Vicki DeMoney. And Vicki had a real vision for women coming out of prison that wanted to change their lives. If you come out of prison, you often are estranged from your family, or it's not a community you need to go back into, because oftentimes incarceration is generational, as a lot of the women that we've worked with have had substance abuse issues that have often been what have landed them in prison. But it's also, that's often generational too. So she provides housing and counseling and life skill classes. And after these women complete the first phase of the program, then we hire them. And so and now one of the things that we love is their offices and facilities are housed on our property. And so we work really in tandem with them, hand in hand. But we've really seen that if you can surround a person with a community of love and support, that they can really flourish. And it's really we all need each other.
Right.
We're not meant to be, in this life alone trying to, grit our way through. But
that's a very interesting angle
if we can foster a community around each other. And one of the things that is, a lot of these women are very vulnerable, but I know what it feels like to be vulnerable. I've had that in my own life. And if you want to change your life, it takes a lot of courage and it takes a lot of strength. So these women have been great examples to me of what courage and strength is. And it's just strengthened me in my own journey, in my own path forward.
Right.
So that's one of the populations we work with. We also work with special needs individuals. And, I believe we're all created for purpose. And often if you have special needs, it's hard to find work. And people, they don't put value on you. But we all have value. I believe we all have value. And we live in a world, and I'm just going to say this, where often the message is that some people are more important than other people. But we're all created equal in God's eyes. And so we've started working with the local school system, and they started bringing students out. They had a work-study program, and it's a special needs program. And they would, it was like, in order to graduate, they would go and work at different companies, and we were one of the companies that they came, and we'd find things for them to do. And I can remember we had one young man, he was graduating, and several weeks before graduation, he had to do a little presentation for his class, and they said, "What is your dream job?" And it was to work at Musee.
Really?
And so we got wind of that. And so after he graduated, we had him come and interview with us, and he's an autistic young man. And he came and interviewed. We gave him a formal interview, but we knew we were going to hire him. But he's been with us for 7 years. We have several autistic people. We have one young woman that has Down syndrome. We have a man that just called me, and he was diagnosed with MS, and he just couldn't find any work because he has to sit down, and he can't work an entire day. But he called me. He said, "I just need something to do." And so I said, "You come tomorrow. We'll find you something." And a lot of times companies are so rigid, but maybe if we're flexible and we'd say there's not one way for this task to be accomplished, and we look for multiple ways to accomplish something, and that we're a little bit flexible, and it's not how do you meet us, but how can we meet you?
Right. Oh, that's good.
Can make a difference. And so we work with that community of individuals. And then finally, we work with a population of folks that just hadn't had the same opportunities you and I have had for education. You mentioned you went to Mississippi State. I went to Ole Miss, and we had opportunities. And opportunities are often directly proportional, and mostly directly proportional to your education. And having education opens up a lot of doors. And we have a lot of people in our state that hadn't had those same opportunities. opportunities because they've lived in chronic poverty. And so we work with a group of folks, and we try to say, what is your big dream? How can we help you get there? Some people that come to me, see, they're just passing through. It's just to provide an income and stability for the next step of their lives. But then there's other folks, they've just been with us for a long time, and this has become their career. And so we look for opportunities for them to have leadership roles at Musee.
That is awesome. That's so encouraging on the point of, taking the, say the incarcerated people and employing them. So me personally, I've got a passion for, there's a place called Friends of Alcoholics in Pocahontas Drug and Alcohol Rehab Center. And my uncle went through that program, and it saved his life.
Wow.
And which it's a Christian-based ministry, but one thing that FOA does, they're guys, you can use them for work or whatever you can do. And so I buy firewood from them. I love to split firewood myself, but I just as a way to, give towards FOA, they call it FOA. I buy firewood every year. And, one thing that I think just hearing your story and you shedding light towards that, because to your point, most companies are going to be rigid and they're not even going to sign up or entertain that idea. And I think you hit the nail on the head. And I love that viewpoint of how can I meet you, not how can you meet me. I think that's huge. I really love that. But one thing I have noticed over the years with those guys, which it's an all male facility there, but they, not only the work ethic, but the joy radiates when they're all, and they come as a team, and it just feels different, and they're excited, and they've been through the biggest valleys.
But they're overcomers. And when you're an overcomer, that joy comes, it's deep within.
Right.
And I see.
But it's contrary to what you would think. I'm not going to hire them because this, but it's like, to your point, I think you're a perfect example of this is better than not doing it,
Well, one of the things I remember saying to one of the women one day, I said, you're just such a hard worker. She says, I just have more to prove. And oftentimes a lot of the folks we work with, they've felt like they're the least, that they don't feel oftentimes worthy, and they haven't necessarily had a voice, and they're so happy for just the opportunity of somebody that believes in them.
Used to rejection.
But the truth is, I know that if we do this podcast, there's many people listening that have very successful companies, far more successful than mine is, and that you have, what we're doing, we all have the opportunity, if not the responsibility, to do and to believe in people and to invest in people. And I will just say this, it's helped restore my life. And as I've been able to, people, it's particularly coming out of prison or in rehab programs, they need mentors too. And when I speak with my women, I haven't walked the same journey. Our paths are different, but I have had a journey, and it's like they encourage me and I encourage them, and I've received just as much.
Right.
And so it's like what we're doing which is unique in a way. It's not something that every business actually should be doing, I believe, or looking for opportunities especially.
Well, the fact that you're truly, genuinely interested in them and their story and meeting them where they're at, whenever what's typical is they just don't get called back on an interview or whatever. And the fact that you're interested in them.
Well, a lot of times also, if you put that you've had a felon, people just write you off. Or it's hard to find a place to live if you have a felony conviction.
That's a good point.
And and I'll share this. I see so many stories, but I'll share one quick story. There's one young woman, and she came to us, and she had been a heroin addict for 15 years. And she had a lot of loss in her life. She had lost her father I think he had been murdered when she was about 2, when her mom, I think, remarried, and she had an abusive stepfather. And so at a young age, to cope, she started using drugs. Part of it is understanding people's stories and why they do what they do. But I think in a way, we're all trying to figure out a way to get through this life, And but she started using drugs at about 11. And I think by 15, she was using heroin, and used heroin for the next 15 years. During that time, there was a lot of losses. She lost a brother to an overdose, as I mentioned, of a lot of drug abuse and substance abuse is generational. She also had a baby, and her grandmother was helping care for it, and the baby was. The grandmother, I think, maybe rolled on the baby while they were napping, and the baby died. And so that's tremendous loss. I mean, as a mother, it's like insurmountable pain, really. But when she was early 30s, we got a call from someone we worked with at the probation office, and he said, I have a girl, I think that would be great here. And so she started going through the Crossroads program, and then came and started working with us. And I will just tell you, she's just flourished. I've never seen anybody take so much initiative. I mean, she had not had the opportunity for upper education, but just being able to have an innate ability to figure things out and to want to succeed. And again, it goes back to feeling like maybe you have more to prove. But, one of the things she has said to me is, I found my purpose here. I found myself. Too. Yeah, it's super rewarding. And, but for me, it's like, isn't that what we want in life? Really to be life-giving to people, and to surround ourselves with people that are life-giving to us. And so it's been a beautiful thing to help me rewrite my own story. And even though my story is very different than what I imagined, I have a beautiful life, I've been on a beautiful journey, just not the journey I thought. It just, it was a completely different path. And so, but I want to say, and I hear a story like that over and over again. I mean, we have many people in the leadership of our company that have been individuals with felonies that have just changed their life. Our office director, she came to us. She had been I think a meth addict, and came to us and was just so determined. And she's been our office manager and been with us for 9 years. Golly. And so we see lives transformed. A lot of it's just having someone that, a lot of times it's just giving someone the opportunity and the chance. And so, as we're talking, and as different people are listening to this podcast, I would really challenge and encourage them. What are ways that it may not be, and you may not have a business. I might be, it may be a mom or somebody, but how are you life-giving to someone in our community? How are ways that you can invest in another life? And if you do have a business, how can you maybe think outside of the box? One of the things, I don't have a business background, and as our company grew, I felt really insecure about that. I just didn't have, I thought, I can't lead this because I don't really know what I'm doing. I don't even know what a business model is. I've never taken a business course. Right. And that's true. Right. And I know very many people that are great business leaders and businessmen and all. But one of the things, sometimes your weaknesses become your strength because I didn't know how it was supposed to be done. Then we came up with our own way of doing things, and we had to, and we just, maybe it gives gives you the opportunity to think out of the box. And that's what we started doing. Like a lot of our women, we just started thinking like, okay, like how do we adapt and adjust? Like people maybe need to go to their parole officer. So maybe we're not so, we can have some leniency, like people can leave work to go. This is something they're required to do. And just like looking for ways, like another thing was like if you're coming out of prison, or if you often in so many people in our state, they don't have the credit to have cars and all that it takes to have the things that are not luxuries, but are things are necessities. But many of our people, don't have transportation. And in Mississippi, we don't have a transport system. So a lot of times it's easy to say, oh, they don't want to work. They're just lazy. Well, maybe if you don't have a way to get to work, it's hard to work. And so we started, I remember one day there was a woman and her car got repossessed and she was distraught. It got repossessed while she was at work. And we began talking to her and we realized that she'd been paying on a used car that she had bought from kind of a loan shark. She'd been paying on it for 5 years, hadn't paid off even the interest of it. And so we said, let that car go. And what we realized, we said, we'll buy you a car and you can pay us back with no interest. And we know what you make, so what you can actually afford. It may just be $10 out of a paycheck. But what it did is it gave us a dependable employee. So we began replicating that with other employees also. Wow. So, but sometimes you have to think out of the box and just not be so rigid and think there's just, there's not one, what is it, Mike? I think my grandmother used to say, there's just not one way to skin a cat.
Right.
That sounds like a real Mississippi thing
That's
to say.
a Mississippi saying for sure. So I never really thought about that, but that is, I think you hit the nail on the head again. Your lack of not, having the business mind from the beginning played a huge benefit. I think that's awesome.
In some ways,
I think, it's because if you did, then you would have gone down a warpath of business centered versus, we've sat here for an hour and 15 minutes and you haven't even talked about how big Musee is. Yeah. And it's,
so we need to probably do that because I think this was only supposed to be about an hour.
I think we can do that pretty quick. But again, that's a testament to, you could have came in here and talked about how big your business was and what you've done, what you've conquered, and with the lack of the business stuff on the front end. Like you could have framed it up that way. But to the lady's point at the trade show in Atlanta, your passion is so obvious. Your passion's not, how much money am I making? What am I doing? You're meeting other people's needs. And I think you're just a beacon for that. And I think that is, so inspiring. And I think what you and Lou had in common is, I think y'all both have a heart that's 3 times the normal size.
Thank you so much, Paul. Well, thank you. Well, I do want you to frame up Musee real quick for us. Just how many bath bombs, BALMS, do y'all make a year? Like, just tell us a little bit about where you're at now, because I know you're bigger than the trade show, or bigger than Livingston Market. To say all of that, we have journeyed and grown, but we've made a lot of mistakes along the way. And so we've had to pivot many times. One of the times right now we're kind of in a pivot is right now. This last year has been a challenge just because we make a luxury product, but the economy's been quite challenging. So you just have to lean in and figure it out. And that's kind of been my mantra. Let's just figure it out. And so we're having to do some things to figure it out. But we have had some great successes too. I don't know how many bath bombs we make a year, but we've made millions of bath bombs. We grew to the largest distributor of wholesale bath bombs in the country. I don't know if that's where we are now, of course, but we quickly grew. Our learning curve was great. Made a lot of mistakes, but we've had a lot of beautiful successes. Now, one of the things I'm wrapping all this up, I do want to make the point that I didn't do this by myself. And I had a small idea. and it flourished. But I did it, and it was the work of the heart and the hands of many, many people that called onto that vision and invested into the vision, and we did it together. So there's no person for Musee that should receive the credit. It's coming together as a community with a common goal and saying and dreaming big. And so that's what we've really done. And we've kind of like what I always think, it's like out of our brokenness, out of all of our brokenness that we all share, let's create beauty in this world, because we live in a really broken world right now.
We do.
And it's hard, and there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of hurt. And if we can create beauty, and if we can be that beauty in this world, and if, life is brief. I feel like I just got out of college, and obviously I didn't, but it goes fast. And if we can leave behind some of that beauty, and I know that's what I want to do, but I don't want to do it alone. And so we've created this community where it's like, let's just make beautiful things and put beauty in this world. That our hope is whoever receives our products, that they would feel loved and they would feel encouraged by them. Like with our candles, I always say, a candle is a physical, if you think about a candle, it's a physical light and darkness. And so my hope is anybody that receives our candles, that it would be a light perhaps in their darkness. It would be a reminder there's hope, there's light in darkness, and a reminder that they can be that light in darkness to someone else. And so we make all kinds of things now. We make bath bombs, we make candles, we make soap, we make shower steamers, we make salt soaks. We do all kinds of luxury bath related products, but it's with the hope that we're creating something that would care for people, would be good for people, not only physically good for people, but good for their soul. Some of our successes has been, we've been Oprah's favorite 3 years in a row.
Wow.
And that was like a really kind of a big deal for us.
For sure.
That was a really cool thing. We won the National Philanthropy Award from the foundation that houses all the independent beauty companies. We got the philanthropy award for our work with felons. We have caught the eye of like Microsoft. We were one of their gifts that they give to all the folks they work with, and they came down and filmed a film about us.
Really?
And I think that's cool that they come down from Seattle. And because we're not only telling the story of Musee, we're telling the story of Mississippi. Mm-hmm. And we had Amazon did the same thing. Amazon made a film on our company. And so, there's a lot of beauty there, but there have also been a lot of challenges. And I think the thing is you just take the next step. It's like being on that path, back to that walk. When there are challenges, you just figure it out and you take the next step, and you don't look too far ahead, but you look a little bit ahead and you say, what are our next steps? And so that's kind of what we've been doing with Musee. And and I, as we wrap it up, because I've gone way over your time, I didn't think you thought you would have someone that talks quite as much. But, if I could encourage folks that, we have a lot of beauty in our state, but we have a lot of challenges and a lot of pain, and we're in it together. Mm-hmm. And like I look at you, you're a really successful businessman. How are ways you're personally making a difference, Right. And how are ways that you use like your resources and all the things you've been blessed with to impact the people around you? And, I kind of sit there and I think, it's not necessarily creating a company, but it may be just volunteering, or it may be just investing into something, or using your gifts to say, I know how to do this. And I think that it may be a small idea you've had.
Yeah. And that's really where this podcast came from, is literally just to try to inject back into somebody else, to help somebody else spur some ideas, or it's been very rewarding. Sorry.
Well, hopefully today, like even our time together would be that for somebody. And, also I think about just, we live in a world now where there's a lot of isolation and people feel there's a lot of loneliness. So it may just be a small thing. It may be someone you've had on your mind and you've been thinking you probably just need to call, but, you just don't because you're busy.
Right.
And maybe it's just, picking up the phone and just saying, hey, I'm here. I think it's the little things too.
Right.
Life is really just a combination of all the little things and how we live those little things out. And so
that's so inspiring.
But I appreciate you letting me.
Oh, this has been, you have an incredible story. And
thank you.
I love the angle again that you took on this. This could have been about your company and the growth, and it's bigger than that, and that's just a testament to your story and your passion, and I am totally inspired.
Well, thank you. And I really thank you for letting me come here and be with you today. And
let you come back to Florida, to the country.
Yeah, it's kind of made me miss it. I told you that, but one day I'm trying to manifest this. I'm going to have a little plot of land with a little farmhouse, and I'm going to come back out here.
There you go.
I'm a city girl now. But I'm going to come back out here and because it is just so rich in beauty. Our whole state is, isn't it? It
is.
Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Miss Leisha.
I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.